Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Arizona Center for Law and the Public Interest's annual event. My name is Andy Gaona, and I am the president of the Center's Board of Directors. I wish that we were all together this evening to celebrate another year of the Center's success. But like so many have had to do over the past year, the Center must adapt. While the COVID-19 pandemic has changed so much about our everyday lives, it has not prevented the Center from continuing its long and storied work to protect the rights of Arizonans, and in particular, the most vulnerable Arizonans. This evening, you'll hear from the Center's attorneys, clients, and others about the impact that the Center continues to have in our great state. But we can only do that work with your support. So on behalf of the Center's Board of Directors and staff, thank you to the sponsors of this event, and thank you to all of you at home who have contributed to the Center for years. Your financial contributions have made the Center an indispensable force in Arizona for nearly a half-century. So I hope you enjoy this evening's brief program, and I hope that you will continue to support the Center. And now, let me turn it over to Danny Adelman, the Center's Executive Director.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks to all of you for joining us, at least virtually. We always like to use the annual event to let you know about the work we've been doing over the past year. And even though we can't be together in person, we wanted to take a few minutes so you can see the kind of work that we've been doing on behalf of the environment and clean energy, on behalf of education for our children, on behalf of every Arizonan's right to receive quality health care, and this year about our incredible work on behalf of Arizona's foster children.
This one broke my heart. She had a serious drug problem. She was being sex trafficked. And did I mention she was 12? The only service that she would get is an undertrained person to stop in and see her and talk to her once or twice a month. We lost her to a sex trafficker on the streets. I don't know what happened to her after that.
You know, at the time, there was a real crisis in the Arizona foster care system. There had been studies and legislative hearings and lots of reports and recommendations, and nothing was ever done. Nothing was ever sustained. So we thought, you know, litigation is a slow way to make change, but it seemed like this was the time, and it was the only way that we were really going to see fundamental change for kids. What we felt was that there needed to be systematic fundamental reform, or the children as they came into care were going to continue to be harmed.
When children come into the child welfare system, it is because of substantiated abuse, neglect, abandonment, thus trauma for these children. So every failure in treatment results in compounding that failure.
The children enrolled in the state's foster care system were not receiving the behavioral health services that they needed in any sort of effective way. And the result was that many of, especially the older children who had been in foster care for a while, were moving from placement to placement because their behaviors were difficult for the foster families to handle. And many of the children were being sent out of state to residential treatment centers away from any sort of permanent plan. And there had been reports in the legislature about the harm that these children were facing living in these large congregate care settings. And there was some talk of plans to reduce that, but that wasn't happening. The children would be separated from their brothers and sisters almost immediately. The trauma of being removed from their family home was significant. And then on top of it, they were not allowed to live with their brothers and sisters. And this just complicated significantly the trauma and their ability to kind of adjust to their new way of life.
Many of us had attempted to address the issues on a one-to-one or an agency basis. And we really were highly, highly ineffective. We really needed the teeth, I should say the expertise and the teeth of the litigation to really hold these systems accountable for these children and for their lives. I was able to read the final settlement agreement. What I saw was real systemic change that would better offer a much better outcome for these children. What we do know about children and child welfare, about any children, is when they have the right services at the right dose in the right environment, they will get better. So thank you to the center for taking this project on. It's been long, it's been hard, and it's been worth it. Thank you.
More than 25 years ago, the Arizona Supreme Court threw out our school finance system as unconstitutional because it was so unfair to the districts that didn't have a lot of property wealth. The legislature replaced it as a result of our case with a system that really did provide adequate resources to schools. But then over the years, the legislature took that funding away. And in a lot of ways, things are even worse now than they were when the court declared our system unconstitutional. As part of my work on this case, I've traveled all over the state. I visited schools where the walls were literally crumbling. I've seen dark classrooms. I've seen schools with virtually no technology. Our technology standards were written more than 20 years ago. I've seen water coming out of taps that was yellow and discolored. I've seen textbooks that were more than 20 years old because the schools didn't have the money to replace them. There are schools all over Arizona with excessive CO2 levels in the air that our children are breathing every day. The state knows this, but they're not doing what they need to do to fix it. We sued again so that all Arizona's children have a safe, secure, appropriate learning environment with all the tools they need to succeed.
The center is representing tribal and non-tribal community organizations in rape cases before the Arizona Corporation Commission to advocate for what's known as a just and equitable transition for communities affected by the early closures of coal-fired power plants. Coal plants in Arizona are closing decades earlier than originally scheduled as we turn to cheaper and cleaner sources of electricity. For example, Navajo Generating Station on the Navajo Nation near Page, Arizona closed in 2019, even though it was scheduled to operate for another 20 years. These early closures are themselves a good thing. Coal plants spew harmful pollutants into the air and contribute to our climate crisis. They use enormous amounts of ground and surface water, and the waste generated by coal plants can pollute local sources of water needed for drinking and for agriculture. But the early closure of these plants means that communities that are economically dependent upon them, like the Navajo Nation, will be devastated unless electric utilities help them transition to an economy based on cleaner sources of electricity generation. Coal plants in Arizona have fueled the rise of cities like Phoenix and Tucson. Without them, many of us wouldn't be here. One of the leaders in the just and equitable transition movement is our client, Tonajone Ane, a Navajo community group led by Executive Director Nicole Horseherder.
Communities that are reliant on coal are going to be devastated when coal plants go away. That's just what happens. Just and equitable transition is simply that we're asking the utilities through the Corporation Commission to give back to communities that have provided so much to the utilities and their prosperity and their growth.
Imagine some of the things that we take for granted, like running water and electricity. Now imagine not having those services in the middle of a deadly pandemic. That's the situation faced by many households on the Navajo Nation, where up to 40% of families lack either running water or electricity. Part of a just and equitable transition is to make sure that households on the Navajo Nation are hooked up to the electric grid. Another part is making sure that water rights are restored to these communities.
I live with no running water today. I still haul my water for my animals and for my house. There are homes all across Black Mesa that don't have running water and have lost their traditional access to the groundwater because of the overpumping of the aquifers. The center has really made it possible for organizations like ours to participate in the Arizona Corporation Commission to build renewable energy projects that could be delivered and used by Navajo communities and keep this partnership going. It's the very least that utilities can do.
Electric utilities have made a lot of money as a result of the hard work and natural resources of the communities surrounding coal plants. And it's only fair that as these coal plants close, those communities are not economically left behind.
Protecting our democracy and the right of the people to vote and to pass their own laws has always been a core mission of the center. When the legislature passes laws that try to take away those rights, that limit the ability of some people to vote or all people to vote on initiatives, the center will always fight to protect those rights. We're part of the team that ensured that people would have the right to vote on Prop 208, and we're now part of the team that is trying to defend Prop 208 to make it so that our schools can have the tools and the resources they so desperately need.
About a year or so ago, we became aware of a very serious problem that children and young adults were having in receiving augmentative communication devices and to assist them with their communication. These were young people who had significant communication disorders. They either couldn't speak at all, or they had very difficult time speaking. There were thousands of young children and adults who had not received the appropriate device from the Medicaid system in Arizona. We were contacted by family members, by special ed teachers, by speech therapists. It all seemed to come to a head very fast. The result of these young people not having their devices was that they were significantly set back in their education, in their ability to socialize, and some of the older members that were denied the devices had jobs, and it interfered with their ability to keep their employment. But in particular, the young people who were at the very formative stages in their cognitive development, with not being able to communicate, they were significantly set back. The families that called us filed grievances. Some of them had filed appeals. Some of them had gone to their legislators and were getting nowhere. Ultimately, because of the work that we did with the Medicaid agency, there were probably 1,000 families who ultimately benefited from the work we did.
The city of Phoenix decided to exclude many immigrants from its COVID emergency rent and utility relief program. This meant that DACA recipients and many other immigrants were excluded from the program. It was wrongful and it was unlawful. One woman that really sticks out in my mind was a single mother. She cleaned houses for a living. She lived in a trailer. She got very sick with COVID, and she lost all of her income as a result of COVID. She wanted to apply so that she could participate in the city's rent relief program, but she was wrongfully excluded. She received eviction notices and didn't know what she was going to do next. We won the case against the city of Phoenix, and that woman and hundreds, or actually thousands of families like her were able to get the emergency relief that they needed and were able to stay in their homes.
The Phoenix area has a significant problem with ozone pollution, which aggravates respiratory diseases and can even cause premature death. And the center is ensuring that local governments responsible for cleaning up that ozone pollution comply with the Clean Air Act and do everything that's needed to protect public health. Another area where the center has been working for decades is to ensure that the public has access to rivers that were navigable at the time of statehood for things like recreation and other uses. For example, the Salt River, before it was dammed, had a regular water flow that people could use for boating, recreation, things like that. But unfortunately, the state has given away the riverbed to private interests, and the public is no longer guaranteed access to them. Why do I want to fight for the environment? It's not just the scenery. The environment is the air we breathe, it's the water we drink, it's the soil that we grow our food in. I think that's worth fighting for.
My name is Sam Snarsh. I'm the Stan Marks Attorney Fellow at the Arizona Center for Law and the Public Interest. When Danny called me to tell me that I got the job, I was absolutely floored. I wanted this job so bad. I was excited to come down and live in the Southwest again, and I was really excited to be able to make a difference for the people in need down here. I honestly hope to be involved in all of the work that the center does. When I applied and when I got here, I was definitely more focused on the environmental aspects, but after working with some of the education finance cases and the healthcare cases, I've really been taken with how many different ways there are to help, and the fact that all of the different problems that the center deals with are so interconnected.
One of the things that's always makes me feel really good is when these families have problems that they've struggled with and they find out that we're a public interest law firm and we don't charge. It is amazing, the relief, and you can hear it, in their voices. And they're very, very appreciative.
Good evening. My name is Bryn DeFusco, and I am incoming president of the board. My husband, children, and I are all products of public schools. Now, while some of us are fortunate to live in districts that can pass overrides and bonds, far too many of Arizona's families are not fortunate to live in districts like these. When you see images of rundown schools with crumbling walls and excessive amounts of CO2, remember that the state is aware of all of these inequities, yet they do nothing. But for the center, the state would continue to defund and ignore our public schools. Folks, zip codes should not determine the type of education that our children receive. It is simply unfair. The center is playing a vital role in making sure that all of Arizona's children receive a quality education. As Andy pointed out earlier, we have so much more work to do, though. Your support ensures that the center is around for another half century to fight for things such as quality education for all of Arizona's children, services for our most vulnerable community members, such as children in foster care and our disabled friends. The center is also fighting for clean air, energy, and water. As Jennifer stated, it's not just about the scenery, it's the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the soil where we plant our food. These things are worth fighting for, but we can't do this work without your support. Please donate now at www.aclpi.org. Thank you so much for your support and have a wonderful evening.